Hello and welcome to our 7-8 minutes of weekly Torah talk. Our guest today is Rabbi Natan Slifkin. He is director of the Biblical Museum of Natural History in Beit Shemesh. Hello, Rabbi. Thank you for being with us.
Hi, great to be with you.
In Parshat Shemini this week, Aaron and his sons begin to officiate as Kohanim, as priests. A fire issues forth from God to consume the offerings on the altar. Aaron's two elder sons, Nadav and Avihu, offer a strange fire before God, and then they die. Aaron remains silent in face of his tragedy. God commands the kosher laws. Land animals may be eaten only if they have split hooves and also chew their cud. Fish must have fins and scales. The first pasuk of the parsha says, "Vayhi bayom hashmini kara Moshe leAharon ulevanav uleziknei Israel," and it was on the 8th day that Moses summoned Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. So, Rabbi, you're director of a Museum of Natural History. So let's speak about animals. We list many animals in our parsha and many rules concerning concerning animals and the way we consume them, we eat them. Is there any logic to these laws?
Well, the Torah doesn't give an explicit reason for any of these. Many people have attempted to find an explanation for them. There could be different layers of explanations. It could be that at one layer there's an idea of giving the Jewish people a special diet that will keep their identity distinct, and it will also, encourage people to practice the idea of mindfulness. So you don't eat whatever you want, but you have to practice restraint.
But in such case, the rules themselves are just arbitrary rules.
No. So I'm saying there's different layers.
Okay.
So that would be the basic layer for kashrut. And then given that idea, then there'd be different explanations as to why some animals are permitted and some animals are forbidden. And there could be all different kinds of explanations for different animals. But it doesn't need to be one, overall unifying explanation for everything. It could be that there's different layers.
So can you give me example of, an animal that we can or can't eat, and why specifically this rule or this animal can be explained?
Right. So, for example, we'll see that a lot of predatory creatures are sometimes forbidden, like amongst mammals. So it has to bring up its cud. So that's talking about only certain herbivores, excluding all carnivores. So there seems to be something conceptually problematic with carnivores, and it's the same with birds. But with fish, there's no such distinction. With fish, it's just fins and scales, and there are plenty of carnivorous fish, that have scales.
Right.
Tuna, right? Piranha. We've served piranha at banquets at the museum. So there could be different ideas that play different roles in different places, or with insects. So the type of insect that's permitted is certain types of locust, which we also raise at the museum and serve sometimes at banquets. And there's no particular, there's no explanation given, but simply speaking, we can say that if there's a plague of locusts and they wipe out all your crops, at least there's something left to eat. Right? So there could be an underlying principle of you're not allowed to eat everything. You have to practice mindfulness and only eat certain things. And then within that, well, which things are you going to be allowed to eat and not allowed to eat? That will depend on different categories.
And can you explain, for example, why not the tiger, but yes to the tuna fish?
Well, I would say perhaps the idea of ruling out predators might be more significant with mammals and birds. It might be less significant with fish because they're not such, visible predators. Or it could be that if you prohibit predators with fish, you're not going to have much left to eat, because virtually all fish are predators. There isn't much plant life in the ocean.
Right. Now,
so, it's impossible to know that could be, what the ultimate reason was.
Now, in our parsha, we have signs by which to identify the animals that we can eat, but there are also lists of specific animals that are forbidden, listed by name. Why is that? why are we given signs for this issue and a specific list or a detailed list for the forbidden food?
So with mammals, it says that to be kosher, it has to have two signs, split hooves and bringing up the cud. And then it lists the four animals that only have one of those signs. The camel, the hare, the hyrax, and the pig. And the commentators explained that the Torah just wanted to give additional stress to the idea that these animals may not be eaten, even though, number one, they were like a little bit kosher. Right? Each of them have one kosher sign. And also, these are animals that were commonly eaten by non-Jews in the region. Camels, hares, hyraxes, pigs were all eaten by indigenous nations. So the Torah had to give, additional stress that they are nevertheless may not be eaten.
To what extent do you think these laws has a social significance? By which to separate Jews from non-Jews or Jewish society from non-Jewish society to make us apart?
Right, so I think it's likely to play a significant role. Maimonides says that all the commandments, all the mitzvot in the Torah serve one or more of three possible reasons. They're to improve our character, to teach us ideas, or to improve society. So even though we might never know ultimately which of these exactly kashrut is designed to accomplish, but I think social identity is likely to be a significant component of that.
Right. How would you answer a Jewish foodie who'd come forward and say, by giving these laws, the Torah is essentially telling us not to live the good life?
The kosher diet is a lot more expansive than is more commonly assumed. We do these exotic fundraising banquets at the museum where we serve all kinds of things. Goat and deer and Asian water buffalo and swordfish and pheasant and piranha. There's all kinds of things that are kosher, but which are not commonly realized to be kosher. In addition, the Talmud mentions an idea that for everything that's not kosher, there is a kosher equivalent. There's certain things that have the taste of non-kosher foods. And the Talmud mentions a fish that tastes like pork. The museum banquets, we've served a certain type of seaweed that tastes like bacon. So very often you can have
how would you know?
Artificial replicas.
How
do
would
I know?
Yeah, how would you know?
But people who attended it, who have eaten bacon, said that it was very similar.
Okay, tell me, is there any hint in our Parsha that the Torah might prefer us to be vegetarian?
No. There is a principle in the Torah we see. There is an idea of a person should be limited or should be conscious of what he's doing. When you think about all the laws of kashrut, it's all about taking an act that could essentially be very brutal, killing and eating an animal and trying to refine it as much as possible. You can't tear a limb from the animal and eat it. You have to kill the animal first. You have to do it in shechita, which is a relatively painless method. You're not allowed to eat the blood, right? So it's all about trying to make the act as refined as possible. And there are also certain hints in the Torah that meat should not be eaten, necessarily too much, not gluttonously.
Not excessively, yes.
Right. So an idea of doing things in moderation and proportion.
How would you communicate our Parsha to the many Jews who don't abide by kashrut laws? What would you tell them, or how would you make it interesting for them to understand?
So what I would say is kosher food certainly can taste, just as delicious as non-kosher food. And this has been something, an important, defining characteristic of Jews for thousands of years. And it's something that Jews have often, sacrificed a tremendous amount for, done without a lot. And when you think about it historically, when people have done without, have really gone to great hardships to keep kosher, compared to nowadays when it is so easy. It's funny, even for me, coming from England, and now traveling a lot in the United States or living in Israel, it's amazing for me because in England, there was virtually nothing that was kosher, in the supermarket. Very, very little. Certainly, it might have changed now, but 30 years ago, when I was a kid, that's how it was. And in America now, it's possible. It always amazes me how you can get kosher food, anywhere. It's really astonishing, how easy it is nowadays.
Yes, and in Israel, it's almost impossible to find non-kosher food
Right.
in the supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
Rob?
And again, that's what I find exciting in this. Some of the, one of the things we teach at the museum is how many things are kosher that people don't realize is kosher. Just because everything now is so industrialized and all we're eating is beef and chicken and duck. But there's really all kinds of other things that are kosher also, but which are just not widely available.
Okay, so give us as a last question, what's the most bizarre kosher thing that we can eat?
So it would have to be the locusts, which are unfortunately not available in the United States, not really available anywhere actually, but we raise them and we're hoping to be able to sell them commercially at some point. It's something which, if you ask, food technologists, they say this is the food of the future. As the world population grows, it's not going to be viable to provide protein to everyone, from beef and poultry. And insects convert plant matter into protein far more efficiently than mammals and birds do. So this is really, the food of the future. So on the one hand, this idea of serving locusts might seem a relic from a primitive era when people, would suffer from a plague and that's all they could eat. But on the other hand, it's really a look to the future that this may be the future of human nutrition. So while it can be culturally quite hard to come to terms with it, but when I had my first locust, it took me about 10 minutes to get the courage to eat it. Now that I've had dozens of them, it becomes a lot easier. And, they can be cooked to taste delicious, crunchy on the outside and a chewy center. Just there's some people who find that they have a hard time with them. I guess they're locust intolerant.
I'll try to get used to the idea until the future comes. And in the meantime, let me thank you and say Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom to you.